But before we discuss about the civil society perspective, let us first have this saying by a modern thinker, Immanuel Kant. The greatest problem for the human species, the solution for which nature compels him to seek, is that attaining of civil society which can administer justice universally. So when we say justice universally, we are referring to this what we call equality. So tayo bilang isang tao, mahalaga po sa atin yung mga maghanap ng solusyon sa mga problema na meron tayo. It is a part of our nature. To seek this what we call solution sa ating mga problema. Let us first discuss what is a civil society. A civil society is commonly referred as the third sector, with the government and the private sectors as the other two. So, pangatlo po siya, yung una natin, we have the government. At yung pangatlo dito, ay pangalawa dito, andito yung mga private or mga private sectors or yung mga businesses. At yung pangatlo po dito ay yung third sector. Yung third sector dito, we refer them as yung mga non-government organizations. Sila po yung bumubuo sa ating third sector. Is broadly understood as the combination of organizations, yan, civil society sa third sector, yung bumubuo po dyan yung mga organizations, yung mga non-government organizations established and individuals that operate outside in the influence of the government institution. From the word none, ibig sabihin without the interference of the government. They operate without the interference of the government. Still, pero fina-follow pa rin nila yung mga regulations, mga law natin within the institution, within the country. The civil society in the Philippines context is all about the spirit of community service. Ayan, within the non-government organizations, one of their main objective is to promote spirit within community sa pamamagitan ng community service. Alright? Pinopromote nila yung unification, yung pagtulong-tulong ng mga tao within the community para maipakita yung tinatawag nating communal spirit. Okay? Parang bayanihan. Ayan, napapakita yung bayanihan, napapakita yung communal spirit sa bayanihan. Is shared by Filipinos through proactive participation and where volunteerism can be found among many of its social traditions. So yung communal spirit, especially sa ating mga Pilipino, hindi na po bago sa atin yung communal spirit na yan. Especially kapag meron tayong mga problema within the community. We volunteer ourselves, di ba? Nakikita natin yung communal spirit, yung pagtulong-tulong. Kapag sinabi natin proactive participation, ibig sabihin kapag may problema, aktibo ka. Kumbaga, binovolunteer mo yung sarili mo without a doubt. These contribute to the values of charity and altruism. Tayo mga Filipino, we consider ourselves as altruism. But siguro not all, but some lang. Ang altruism kasi kumbaga nagiging selfless ka. Kumbaga iniisip mo muna yung pangangailangan ng ibang tao bago yung pansarili. Altruism. Okay, for the welfare of others, and from which many civil society organizations, non-government organizations, and foundations pattern their values and missions. So usually, yung mga non-government organizations natin dito sa mga third sector na to or civil society na to, yung binibase nila yung mga objectives nila sa mga base sa mga community. Kung ano yung mga pwede nilang ibigay sa community. Kung paano nila tutulungan yung community. We also have the role of society organizations. Okay, role of the civil society organizations or the CSO. Ayan po yung civil society organizations natin. Mga civil society organizations or mga non-government organizations pa rin yan. Is a very essential part of our liberal society. From the word liberal society, there is liberty. CSO are composed of various actors. Yung tinatawag nating actors dito, like our last lesson, tayo po yun, yung gumagalaw sa ating community, tayong uma-act within the community. Such as other groups, organizations, or institutions that come together to attain a particular goal that is vitally for the greater good of society. So usually, yung mga organizations natin yan, nabubuo po sila para makatulong sa ating society. Alright, they promote something to help the society. The common idea about CSO is that they operate outside the control of the state. So they operate outside the control of the government. Pero minsan, yung government at yung mga non-government or ay yung mga non-government organizations together with the government, they work together, they unify together for the fulfillment of the same ends. Hindi nila the government doesn't control them, but also kapag kinakailangan ng government ang kanilang tulong, they work together as one. Especially kung pangkabutihan naman like yung mga relief goods, ganyan, yung magbibigay ng mga relief goods, nag-intervene po yung mga non-government organizations natin dyan to help the government in helping these people. Okay, they have the same goal to help people. Yan, when thinking about the role in which people, organizations, and the state come together, forming structures and functions within yung mga non-government organizations natin, unlike yung mga social movements natin kasi, ang non-government organizations natin, they have their what we call structure at meron din silang function. Pag sinabi natin structure, meron po silang kaayusan within the group at alam nila kung ano yung function nila within the society. What make up the fixture of our society? We have to look into the gray areas between these relationships to explore the importance of CSOs in the social milieu. Pag sinabi kasi natin gray areas, kumbaga in times of kumbaga mga problema sa buhay, problema within the society. Yung mga hindi maganda sa society, diyan pumapasok yung ating diyan natin nakikita yung pagtulong ng mga CSOs natin, yung mga non-government organizations natin. Nakikita natin yung importansya nila sa community or the social milieu. From the word social milieu, we are referring to the whole or the community itself. Kapag may mga problema na, especially kapag may mga hindi maganda sa society, kapag may mga nararanasan tayong mga problema, especially kapag may bagyo, ganyan, na baha, nakikita natin yung importansya ng mga taong to kasi yung mga institutions, yung mga groups na to, yung mga organizations na to, because they offer help. Yung mga nagbibigay ng mga relief goods, they are also, yung mga non-government organizations also contribute in that part, in that aspect. And then, we also have yan, state power. Tayo, the Philippines is considered as a state. We have our own power. Yung state power daw, yung kakayahan ng isang bansa to enforce yung mga laws na meron po siya. Okay, kapag nagiging absolute daw yung kapag naging complete, yung mga tao daw na sasakupan ng bansa with its state power, kaya niya daw pong maisubmit or yung hayaan na tao na sumunod sa kanyang mga kagustuhan. CEOs are the entity that somehow balances this kind of power. So, between the government, between the state and yung mga tao, tayo daw, yung mga CSO daw po ang nasa gitna. Sila daw po yung entity na nasa gitna. Sila daw yung nagbabalanse sa kapangyarihan ng state together with the tao. Kasi whenever kasi na may mga pangangailangan ng mga tao, yung mga CSOs po natin ang nagko-communicate sa ating mga government para magkaroon ng magandang interaction. Okay, where balance can only be attained when there is an equal weight opposite to it. So it's like parang weighing scale. Dapat balanse yung dalawa. In this analogy, the balance between two actors will assert a better reading or output. So there is a good relationship between the state and the people within the state kapag mayroong bumabalanse sa kanila. Ang bumabalanse kasi sa kanila ay the CSOs. Say for example, parang kayo, student, 'di ba kami ang nasa gitna at tapos yung school ang nasa kabila. So whenever na kapag may mga concerns kayo, hindi ko naman nilalahat, may mga concerns kayo, kami yung nagko-communicate para mas mabilis na mabigyan ng atensyon. Parang ganun po yung ginagawa ng mga CSOs to communicate these problems with the state or the government. This relationship, however, is dependent on how the institutional capacity of the CSOs engages the government in different forms. So nakadepende pa rin daw sa kakayahan ng mga CSO kung paano nila i-engage yung government in a different form. Engagement in terms of policy is dependent on the policy context. Power is the most essential thing to study on these terms. So within the state, within a country, mahalaga po yung kapangyarihan, mahalaga po yung power. Kasi kapag wala kang kakayahan, wala kang power, you don't have the ability to do something, parang ganyan. Because the strength of social groups only relies on how their environment allows power to flourish. Yan, yung power niyan, nakakaapekto din yung environment sa atin. Nakakatulong po yung environment natin na palawakin yung kakayahan natin na gumawa ng something. Especially yung mga community natin within the group, di ba? Yung mga bagay na nakasurround sa atin, ginagamit natin sila. Ginagamit natin yung mga bagay na yun to help us na magawa yung isang bagay na gusto nating i-promote or gusto nating gawin. Other political structures and cultures tend to stifle groups by restricting the rights. So yung mga political groups na natin within the government, okay, yung mga political structures natin, ng mga grupo na bumubuo diyan. Syempre meron po silang mga tinatawag na law. Ito yung mga law na to, ito yung nagre-restrict sa kanila na gawin yung mga bagay na gusto nila. Okay? And then the absence of these right may cause the groups to lose ground and be disbanded. Parang sa relationship lang siguro. In a relationship, kapag masyadong stricto yung isa sa kanila, kumbaga nagkakaroon ng parang nasusuffocate yung isa sa kanila kaya nagkakaroon ng hiwalayan. Parang ganoon din po sa ating organizations or within the community. Kapag masyadong stricto, kapag masyadong nasasakal ka sa mga batas na meron, kung minsan nagkakaroon ng, tawag dito, nagkakaroon ng, loose ng, faith or tiwala dun sa mga bagay-bagay na yun, dun sa law na yun. Kumbaga nasu-suffocate sila, nasasakal sila masyado and they want to be free. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng mga social movement, 'di ba? Nagkakaroon tayo ng mga nagra-rally. Ito yung mga feeling nila nasu-suffocate sila sa mga batas na meron tayo within the bansa. This is therefore very critical for organizations to check the power of institutions. So mahalaga daw, within the institution, within the country, within the state, mahalaga daw na balansehin niya ang lahat. Not only the state but also offer groups so as to balance the relationship between this very influential group. So in order for this social movement not to be born, to these people na magkaroon ng tinatawag nating changes sa kanilang mga beliefs, changes sa kanilang kung mga bagay na nasa isip nila, mga paniniwala nila, the state must balance this kind of control, this kind of power. And then we also have, remember that regarding the implementation of projects and in terms of how representation is achieved across all classes and groups. So when they say implementation of this what we call projects, kapag may mga pinapatupad, di ba? Representation is achieved across all classes and groups. The state can only do much. The state can only do much. So parang within the government, yung mga tao sa ating government, yung mga implementation of policies, they can do that. But yung mga nire-represent nila yung mga sarili nila sa mga iba't ibang institution, sa mga iba't ibang grupo, hindi po silang gumagawa. Hindi nila kayang gawin yun. Kaya gumagawa or gumagamit po sila ng ibang tao, gumagamit po sila ng ibang institution, gumagamit po sila ng mga other organizations para tulungan sila na i-represent yung sarili nila sa mga iba't ibang klaseng tao. Like say for example, yung government natin, 'di ba? Yung kapag yung government natin meron silang gustong ibigay sa mga tao na nasa liblib na lugar, hindi sila yung diretsong pumupunta. Gumagamit po silang ibang tao, kino-communicate nila ibang tao para ipaabot yung tulong na gusto nila ipaabot sa mga tao na nasa bundok, nakatira sa bundok, yung mga nasa lanta ng bagyo. Ito yung limitations din ng ating government. They cannot represent themselves but they use other groups to represent themselves. Okay, the liberal democratic politics system, kapag sinabi natin liberal democratic system, democratic political system, ito yung tayo as a democratic country. We have the right and meron tayong mga karapatan given by the government. System acknowledges this complexity and thus is more pluralistic than other forms. Okay, one can argue that it is only in this system that such groups exist. So kapag sinabi nating pluralistic, iniisip niya po yung kabuuan, hindi po yung individual. Okay? One can argue, tulad ng sabi natin within the community last time, that within the community, kapag may mga problema, may gustong i-communicate sa mga tao, kapag may mga gustong gawin, i-promote, usually as pluralistic po siya, as a whole. Sinasabi niya within the barangay, sinasabi gumagawa po or kailangan mag-attend ng mga meetings to inform these people na meron tayong mga bagong proyekto, ganyan. One can argue that it is only in the system that such group exists. So since in other forms of government where power is centralized, yan. Government where power is considered as centralized. Pag sinabi nating centralized, isa po yung naghahawak ng kapangyarihan. Isa po yung merong power to do something. That is our government. Kasi isipin nyo, without our government, wala tayong structure sa ating bansa. Other countries can just wala tayong political domination or wala tayong political freedom. Pag sinabi natin political freedom, hindi tayo malaya tayo sa free domination. Malaya tayo sa mga pananakop ng mga ibang bansa. Malaya tayo sa pagpasok ng ibang bansa sa atin. Kapag meron tayong sariling government, meron tayong sariling territory, meron tayong sariling law. Kaya government, kung saan power is considered as centralized. Okay, they govern the country to help us protect from other invaders. All right? Representation can only be done by the elected officials. Of course, yung mga nagre-represent sa mga tao-tao na yan, yung mga tao may posisyon. Yung mga elected officials po natin. A very good representation of civil society groups in the Philippines is the party list representation in the House of Representatives. Therefore, kapag sinabi kasi natin mga party list na yan, di ba ito yung mga kapag may mga boto-botohan, di ba may mga party list. Ito mga party list na to, instead na nagboboto ka kasi ng isa-isa, iboboto mo sila kumbaga as an organization. Tinawag po silang party list kasi in an organization, madami sila. Kumbaga iboboto mo, kumbaga magra-run sila as a group. Alright? And then therefore engaging the state directly. The party list groups come from different sectors. Pero yung party list na tinutukoy po natin dito, ito yung mga movement natin, ito yung mga organizations natin na binubuo ng mga kababaihan, binubuo ng mga kabataan, mga farmers, mga senior citizens. 'Di ba? Ito yung kapag bumubuo sila ng mga grupo para magbigay ng awareness that they have the needs for something, ganyan. Based on the Philippine law, religious institutions are not allowed. Yan, parang meron tayong kasing law that I myself do not understand. So, meron tayong law dito na pinaprohibit yung tinatawag nating religious institutions to represent due to the separation church-state. Kumbaga, ito yung law natin, the church and state separation. So if you want to know about it, you can just search it about the church and state separation. Ayan. Meron tayong tinatawag dito na an intermediary groups are structured and organized with a set of hierarchy. Pag sinabi po nating tawag dito intermediary, sila po yung nasa gitna. Okay, tulad din sabi natin kanina between the state and the people, yung mga social yung mga organizations natin, non-government organizations natin, sila yung nasa gitna. Sila yung mediator, sila yung intermediary. Okay, within this group, meron din po silang mayroon silang kaayusan at meron po silang hierarchy. Pag sinabi nating hierarchy, meron silang may mga namumuno, may mga miyembro, 'di ba? Meron silang president, vice president, ganyan din. And are legitimized by the agreed upon set of codes, of course. Meron din silang mga law. Meron din silang mga batas within the organization. Kung siguro part kayo ng mga maliliit na organization, napapansin niyo itong mga set of hierarchy na to. Meron kayong mga elected officials, meron kayong mga sinusunod within your organization. Part po nung tinatawag nating hierarchy yan. A non-governmental organization is by far a clear representation of how civil groups once they achieve a semblance of identity. Pag sinabi natin semblance of identity, kung paano nila pinapakita yung sarili nila in public. Kung paano nila ipakita yung kaayusan, pag sinabi nating social capital, and be a force in terms of lobbying and promotion of their interest. How they build this kind of relationship with people, that is social capital. Pag sinabi natin lobbying, pag siguro kayo mga grupo, 'di ba? Kung nasa school kayo, kapag meron kayong mga grupo-grupo, tapos merong activity na binigay sa inyo ni teacher, paano ina-apply yung tinatawag nating lobbying? Ang lobbying kapag within a group, naghahanap kayo ng ibang mga grupo para i-support kayo sa mga gusto niyong gawin. Lobbying po 'yun. So within the institution sana, kapag yung mga iba't ibang institutions niya, mga iba't ibang organizations nila 'yan, para masuportahan sila, naghahanap po sila ng tulong from other organizations. Sinasabi nila kung gusto na nilang i-promote, gusto na nilang itulong sa community. Kumbaga sa pamamagitan ng adhikain nila, nakakapag-invite sila ng ibang mga institution or ibang mga organizations na tutulong sa kanila para suportahan sila sa kanilang mga adhikain. Lobbying po yun. And promotion para may i-promote po yung kanilang mga interest. Okay. Within is this what we call the civil society, meron po dapat mga characteristics to. Ito yung mga characteristics natin. The first one is organized, voluntary, and needs-oriented. Yung mga non-government organizations natin, nakafocus sila po ay organized. Meron po silang hierarchy. Tulad ng sabi natin kanina, meron silang mga sari-sariling batas para sa kanilang mga miyembro at para sa kanila as a group. Voluntary po sila. Sila po yung kapag may mga, especially kapag may mga baha, di ba? May mga problema sa ating mga community, vina-volunteer po nila yung organization nila to help. Alright? And we also have needs-oriented. Nagpo-focus po sila sa pangangailangan ng community. Yan po yung mga characteristics ng isang non-government organization. Maayos sila, mayroon yung kaayusan. Voluntary, they volunteer themselves. And then, nakafocus po sila sa mga pangangailangan ng mga community. Ayan, non-government organizations. NGOs naman which operate on the fingers of the political system are in a very advantageous position. So it's like because of the adhikain of these NGOs, they have this what we call parang yung government nasa likod nila. But the government doesn't intervene with what they do. Kasi yung mga NGOs kasi they play by the rules, by the law. Unlike as a social movement, they are against this what we call law. Okay, this kind of positioning provides them the leeway and opportunity to look at the bigger picture in both government and its people. Yung the fact that the government is behind them and then nakikita po nila ito yung nagpo-provide sa kanila ng opportunity para makita kung ano yung meron sa government at sa tao. At ito yung nagbibigay sa kanila ng ability na both sides of the relationship while gaining trust, ito yung nagbibigay sa kanila ng ability na makuha yung atensyon ng dalawa at makuha yung kanilang trust. Gaining this kind of access, NGOs dictate many societies' agenda, okay, by having the inputs from interest groups and individuals and distilling this to a formal advocacy. So yung mga NGOs and mga non-government organizations natin, yung mga yan, parang sila yung mga klaseng mga organizations na kapag pumupunta sila sa within the community, they seek, di kumbaga nagbibigay sa kanila ng mga inputs. Sabihin natin kapag may mga NGO o mga non-government organization about farmers, yan. Yung mga farmers na yan, pupunta sila sa mga iba't ibang community to help farmers para tulungan sila sa kanilang mga plantation, tulungan sila sa kanilang mga ginagawa about farming. Yan. That they are considered as NGOs having their inputs sa tinatawag natin mga interest group. Okay? And then, social movements, comparing social movements with non-governmental organizations. Ayan, alam na po natin yung mga social movements na yun tsaka yung non-government organizations. Yung mga non-government organizations, meron silang kaayusan within the community. And then, hindi sila nakafocus sa issue ang mga non-government. Ang social movement kasi, kapag, for example, may nakikita tayong mali within the society, tapos may pareho tayong adhikain, mabubuo tayo within that at mabilis lang din mawawala pag nakamit na natin yung mga kagustuhan natin. Ayan, that is the difference between the two. We can see glaring differences as well as similarities. So meron din silang pagkakaiba at meron din silang pagkakapareho. Non-government organizations are more formal. Ayan, mas formal ang non-government organizations kasi hindi sila basta-basta nabubuo. Ay meron silang mga batas within their organization. Meron silang mga sinusunod. Whereas social movements on the flip side are informal. Informal sila kasi they are formed when these people have the same objectives. And then they don't have this what we call kaayusan. Hindi sila wala silang mga rules and regulations within the movement, within the organization. If social or movements have bigger membership, ang social movements kasi malaki po yung mga population nila unlike sa mga NGOs. Less cohesive. Ang mga NGO ay less cohesive. Kumbaga, they don't unify much. And then hindi nila masyadong pinapakita yung sarili nila within the community masyado. Whenever may mga needs lang sila, may mga needs yung community, they appear. They tend to help. Doon sila nagkakaroon ng unification. Okay, social movements are by definition groups that exist for a sole purpose. The social movement kasi nag-exist daw sila for a sole purpose. May purpose sila or issue. Tend to fizzle out when it's attained. Pag sinabi nating exist for sole purpose, nag-exist lang sila kapag meron silang gustong baguhin sa society. Pag nakamit na daw nila yung mga objectives na yun, they tend to fizzle out or nabubuwag na sila. These movements, parang yung mga nagrarally, di ba? These movements are grand and sweeping in its scale. Kapag sinabi natin grand, pangmalakihan sila in its scale. Pangmaramihan yung bilang nila. Their impact is mostly short-lived and fragile. So mabilis silang mabuo, mabilis lang din silang mabuwag. Social movements exist through the sheer will of their members in spreading their concerns in various platforms. Ayan, yung mga social movements, kapag nag-i-invite po sila ng mga tao, ang ini-invite po nila yung mga katulad nilang may paniniwala. Say for example, meron sa government, may something na mali. Tapos may maraming tao na umaayaw doon sa law na yun. And then yung mga social movements nila, gumagawa sila ng paraan para ma-invite tong mga tao to para mapabilang sa kanilang grupo. or community. And then NGOs play within the rules. Yeah, the difference kasi between the social movement and mga non-government organizations natin, yung mga non-government organizations natin, they play within the rules and regulations. Kumbaga, hindi sila nagiging against sa mga law natin. Unlike social movement, when they see something that is wrong, is either yung may paglalaban nila ay for benefits or nakaka-benefits atin or destructive. They don't care about the law. Okay? And then, for the next one, we have ayan. The strength of social movement relies on how society perceives the norm they propose to alter or the idea they want shattered. Social movements have a more direct impact to the society than NGOs. Meron daw silang mas malaki daw ang impact ng social movements kaysa sa mga non-government organizations. Kasi yung mga social movements natin, they are more obvious. 'Di ba, mas pinapakita nila yung adhikain nila, yung mga pinaglalaban nila. Pinapakita nila yung action kaya they have direct impact sa society rather than NGOs. Kasi yung mga NGOs natin, they appear when, the community needs them. Nagpapakita sa tumutulong sila para sa kabutihan ng ating community. But the impact is quite polarizing. Unlike kasi sa NGO, yung mga social movement, yung mga impact nila, although meron silang direct impact sa mga tao, yung impact na yun ay polarizing. Or kumbaga nagkakaroon po ng disagreement sa mga tao. Because yung tinatawag nilang progressive nature ng mga social movements. Yung mga progressive nature nila, ito yung mabilis na pagdami, mabilis na pagbabago sa kanilang mga adhikain, sa kanilang mga pinaglalaban. So kapag sinabi natin polarizing sa mga tao na nakakaobserma nito, nakikita nila yung mali sa mga pinaglalaban nila. Their progressive ideas tend to test the limitations of the state. Ayan. Kapag yung mga social movements kasi, inaatake nila yung kahinaan ng state. Kapag sinasabi nating social thought, ito yung mabilis na pagbabago sa mga kaisipan ng mga tao. Kapag may mga nakikita silang mali, inaatake ng mayroong nakikita silang kamalian sa ating government, ginagawa ng mga social movements, they tend to attack that kind of negative thing. And then yung tinatawag nating social thought, yung mga tao kasi within the social movement, they have, kumbaga, mabilis nagbabago ang kanilang mga isipan. Mabilis na impluwensyahan ang kanilang mga isipan. Right? And then we also have, ayan, yung characteristic po ng ating social movement, informal sila. Kasi they don't have this what we call structure. And then issue-based. Unlike sa NGO, ang social movement ay nakafocus sa issue, not the needs of the community. Progressive kasi sila kasi yung mga pinaglalaban nila, yung mga gusto nila ipaglaban within the society, mabilis magbago. Yung mga ideas nila, they are considered as growing. Alright? And then we also have social movements represent the collective disdain of individuals. Ayan, yung mga social movements natin, sabi dito, collective disdain of individuals. Kapag sabihin natin, kayo mga estudyante, di ba? Or tayo bilang mga citizen ng ating bansa. Tapos ayaw natin yung mga batas na pinapatupad ng ating government. So we hate that kind of law, sabihin natin ganyan. So as a part of the social movement, kapag may mga social movement na na-observe yung mga klaseng ganitong behavior, ang ginagawa nila is to invite us. Kinukuha nila tayo as a part of their group para mas dumami at para mas lumakas yung kakayahan nila na baguhin yung mga nakikita nilang mali sa society. Their ways are more confrontational. Ayan, yung mga paraan nila, kino-confront nila, dinidirect nilang atakehin yung problema. Rather than NGOs, ang mga NGOs kasi because of the emotion negatives movements that appeal to people. NGOs, sabi nga kanina, play with the rules. So when NGOs act, kino-consider pa rin nila yung mga batas natin within the bansa. And then we also have NGO play by the rules. Ayan, yung mga NGOs, mga non-government organizations natin, when they play, they always consider the rules. Tulad na lang tinatawag natin yung mga LGBT. Ayan, minsan yung mga social movement natin, yung mga social movement natin, hindi naman lahat sila masama. Yung mga pinaglalaban naman nila, hindi lahat masama. Sometimes yung mga social movement natin, nagiging formal organization po sila. Yung mga nagiging informal sila dati, pero nagiging formal sila sa pamamagitan po ng mga backings nila. Mga may matataas na position for the government, 'di ba? Ginagamit po sila para kumbaga marinig, yung kumbaga para suportahan yung mga tao na nagba-back sa kanila. Katulad na lang mga nadami tayong mga iba't ibang organizations like yung mga LGBT natin. Okey, sometimes yung mga government ginagamit yung mga iba't ibang organizations na 'to para sometimes to support what they do or to destroy something. Yung mga organizations dati natin na naging informal tulad ng LGBT or the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights occupy the moment of documenting. Kumbaga yung mga LGBT nila, they are considered as an organization na, mga non-government organization na po sila. Na dati mga just a simple community, just a group lang sila. Because of the things that they do, they consider themselves already as a formal organization. And then, interest group naman. Meron tayong sinasabi naman ng mga interest group. Civil society groups that exist primarily to push for policy. Okay, yung mga interest group natin para mga social movement lang po sila. Pero ang mga interest group natin kasi are actually the byproduct of the interconnections. Kapag mga interconnections, ito yung mga tulad ng sabi natin kanina, binubuo ng mga farmer, binubuo ng mga matatanda, binubuo ng mga kabataan, binubuo ng mga whatever. Okay, interconnections across societal actors. Pag sabihin natin within yung mga farmers na yan, kapag meron silang gustong kumbaga they want help from the government to do this, to do that, and yan. And then nagkakaroon po ng mga interest group. Kapag yung mga government na yan nagtitipon-tipon, and then they want to seek help from these people, they became an interest group. Coalitions, ayan. Pag sinabi natin coalitions, kapag may mga yung dalawang tao or madami pang tao, grupo, institution, or mga countries, nagtitipon-tipon at meron silang pagtitipon-tipon para ma-solve ang mga problema. Ang tawag po doon ay mga coalitions. Yung mga malalaking grupo nagpo-form as one para ma-solve yung problema, coalition. Are formed from these concerns and as such have a bigger scope and social capital than if they were to push their agenda. Yung mga coalitions din, kumbaga from the bigger ones to the smaller ones. So to seek help sa mga yung coalitions na to, yung mga part ng coalitions na to, gumagamit din po sila ng mga formal groups. Gumagamit po sila ng organizations like non-government organizations to support them sa kanilang mga or gumagamit po sila ng mga social movements to support them on something. Okay? Social movements because of their importance in building niya. Yan. Yung mga social movements na yan, minsan ginagamit din yan ng government or ginagamit din yan ng mga tao na may position sa ating government. When they use these people to destroy something, when they use these people to promote something, 'di ba? When use these people to provide awareness on something, 'di ba? They use the help of social movements. And when they promote something to help someone, ginagamit po nila yung mga non-government organizations, especially kapag tinutulungan nila dito yung mga community. Yung mga community na nakakaranas ng hirap. Tinutulungan sila sa pamamagitan po ng mga non-government organizations. They provide help. Binibigyan sila ng mga damit, binibigyan sila ng mga relief goods, ganyan. They provide good or social welfare sa mga taong to. And then, towards their favor. Ayun lang, thank you.